Welcome to another edition of Politics and Run. I'm Egberto, Willies, your host. You know, we intend to bring you the best of progressives. Well, today we are honored to have David Zuckerman, who is the Lieutenant Governor of Vermont. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing quite well. I mean, what a great crowd of people. I was here yesterday and just meeting folks who are doing amazing work all over the country, down at the ground level, which is so critical.
Well, you know, it's so important that we start to exert what I call progressive pressure. And the reason why is that most Americans, when you go ahead and forget about labels or anything, ask them who they are, they support the policies that people like yourself, the Lieutenant Governor of Vermont, support. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Boston, but I went to UVM in Vermont. And in '92, I saw Bernie speak on the steps of the library and thought, who is this guy?
Right.
What is this different world of politics? And that inspired me, as obviously he has now inspired thousands and tens of hundreds of thousands all across the country. And I got involved in his campaign and volunteered. And then local folks who were involved in what was then the Progressive Coalition, now the Progressive Party, the most successful statewide third party in the country. Folks asked me to run in 1994. I'm still a student. I lost, but I won in '96, and I've served for 24 years since then as a legislator for 18 years in the House and the Senate, and for 6 years as Lieutenant Governor. And we in Vermont have really shifted the discussion. In the '90s, the Democrats sort of thought, oh, the progressives are out to take down the Democrats. And progressives said, we're out to become the second major party.
Right.
At that time it was the Republicans, still is as far as scale. And to push these policies and issues for working people and for affordable housing and tackling climate issues and social justice issues. It's not about taking down a party or not. It's this sort of, it's not a game, you know, policies matter. And interestingly enough, since the '90s, when the Democrats had a small majority in the House and a small majority in the Senate and a fairly nascent progressive party, to today, the Progressive Party has grown statewide. I still don't know how, managed to become Lieutenant Governor. And the Democrats have become supermajorities in the House and Senate. And the conversation in Vermont has gone from center-right to center-left.
Right.
Whereas in the rest of the country, while we're still under the sort of duopoly that is, you know, controlled by the media, controlled by massive money, we've seen the country keep shifting to the right. So, I don't know.
Well, you know, the interesting thing is it's not the country shifting to the right. It's the politicians shifting to the right and trying to drag the people along with it. But at the same time, I tell you what, the people are progressive. It's interesting to me that when you take a look at Biden is a true, what I call a neoliberal Democrat. But what is interesting to me is that in order to maintain his power, progressives like yourself and others saved him, and in response, he actually provided the most progressive type of policies since I don't know, maybe Roosevelt.
Well, certainly in multiple decades, for sure. And you know, what's really difficult right now is getting that message out to people.
Right.
When you look at what is poorly named the Inflation Reduction Act,
yes,
which really invested billions and billions of dollars in not only typical infrastructure, but actually environmental shifts.
Right.
Whether it was transportation, whether it's investments in energy production and shifts on efficiency. And a lot of those are incentives and supports for working class people.
Exactly.
To be able to get those things. That's been so poorly told. And, you know, I'm not a Biden Kool-Aid drinker.
Right.
But he's done a lot. And, you know, Bernie has done a lot of advising with him. And out of that last presidential campaign, Biden saw the energy that Bernie had. Not the energy Bernie had, but the energy of the people
brought with him, yes.
Bernie and with Bernie. And so some of them get that, and they're seeing that. Not the majority of them just yet.
Right.
And of course, the House is an incredibly challenging circumstance. But, you know, in my mind, if Biden stays in, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
And people, I think, do have to get up and go out and do the grassroots work that happened in 2020, because the alternative, as bad as some folks feel Biden might be, whether it's with respect to Israel policy in particular in Gaza, but some other areas, Trump would be thousands of times worse and our democracy would be worse off. And I'm not an apologist. I think we have to continue to do the hard work to shift our whole system away from binary thinking. You know, one of the things that
I like the way you said that. I mean, we need people out there that think that way, different frames of references, different levels of indirection. You have to get away from this binary, this duopoly kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and I say this to many of my liberal friends who are still very committed to either the Democratic Party or the current electoral and financial system.
Exactly.
And I point out how good a job we are starting to do to think non-binary with race, non-binary with gender.
Yes.
And I say this to them so that it can, where they have already shifted their mind, they could then maybe create that mindset parallel in politics. Because
exactly.
If you just say, the system's broken, they're like, but it's unchangeable, or this is the only way to do it, or we have to beat the Republicans. I'm like, if the mindset is have to beat the Republicans, as opposed to shifting the system to allow far more voices in, to allow far more perspectives in, and to truly represent where the mass direction of the public is,
exactly,
then we're limiting the scope of the possibility. And I point out that in Vermont, where we have a supermajority, 2 years ago, the Democrats in the House tried to pass a bill that was going to consolidate power as opposed to expand the power.
Right.
And because I helped defeat that, they then defeated the Senate bill that was going to implement a study on ranked choice voting for statewide office. And I said, they're shooting themselves in the foot. The idea should be to expand the choices through ranked choice or any other expansion of the voting system away from binary system thinking, and really address campaign finance reform and make a robust public system that competes with private so that no one will do the private financing and actually will make it so everyday people can run.
And I think with people like you fighting, now, let's get a little bit into your race now, because you have to run for re-election every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
And thus far, you've been hitting home runs every single time. You intend to hit a home run in 2024?
I do. I'm the only statewide office holder that has a primary. The other Democrats don't. So I say that in that phrasing because I run in the Democratic primary.
Right.
Because you can only run in one primary. I win that primary, and then I obtain the progressive nomination as well in order to make sure I can run with both.
Oh,
then
got
in the general election, I run as a progressive/Democrat, which enables me to show people both where I am on the issues,
right,
to be one of the beacons out there for people to see that someone with a third-party label can go into higher office, which I never expected.
Right.
When I first ran as a
you didn't think as a third party you would win.
I thought I'd be in the House, and that's as far as I'd ever get.
Right.
And that's why I stuck my neck out on cannabis reform, environmental issues, election reform, raising minimum wage, universal health care, marriage equality. I thought, it doesn't matter what I do. I'm going to never get to higher office. Let me just throw the farthest out issues and expand the discussion. And in Vermont, it was actually possible. And I think it's possible.
But it's the norm. If we could get the non-voter excited,
right,
then that's where the country is.
Yeah. It frustrates me that the United States, somehow we still consider ourselves this sort of hallmark of democracy. And when you look around the world, look what just happened in France. They have a multiple voting round. And so in the first round, the public suddenly saw, holy moly, the right wingers are going to take over. And in the second election, boom, they came out in droves. If you give people a reason to vote, they'll come out and vote. It shouldn't be fear. It should be hope and opportunity.
Yes.
And that's why Bernie, I think, lit such a fire, because he talked about the things people care about in a very real, concrete way, that in a system that creates as much wealth as this system does, why do we have people with unhealthy drinking water? Why do we have people living on the street? Why do we have people that, don't have health care, much less sick care? Health care should actually be before sick care.
Thank you.
Health care is about the food we eat and the quality of what we put in our bodies. Health care is about not working 60 and 80-hour weeks so that we're grinding our bodies down into mush and we're exhausting our minds and creating the mental health challenges. Health care is about prevention. Sick care is what is after that, whether we get cancer or as we age, different issues and ailments, and we have to take care of those things.
Exactly.
But we don't view these things through any appropriate lenses, in part because of mainstream media and the corporate money that goes into the left and
That's
the right.
why we have
not just right wing.
That's why we have independent media, because
That's right.
first of all, you get a chance to expand on the things that you really want to say that you don't get to say in 2 or 3 minutes that you get on mainstream media. You get a chance to get into all the other nooks and crannies where people are. I mean, I'm glad that you hit the media, because one of the issues that we have is the media allows the politicians to ill-inform the people. And what our job is to try to make it better. Now, as Lieutenant Governor, what do you do in Vermont?
Well, it's an interesting position because it's considered a part-time job. For one, there's 3 official roles. One is, of course, if something happens to the governor,
you are the governor.
So you have to be ready to do that. Know the issues, know the people across government, know the people in the state. 2, which is the most profile job, is you are the town moderator or the presiding officer of the Senate. And that's about the institution itself.
Right.
Making sure that the rules are actually followed so that every voice within the Senate, which is a
heard, right.
caveat, is heard, and that the rules are followed and that sort of shenanigans aren't played. Because if we don't have faith in the institution, then we don't have an institution.
Right.
And that's what is actually also breaking down right now nationally. And then the third is this bizarrely named Committee on Committees, which is the Lieutenant Governor and 2 senators that actually appoint the standing committees of the Senate. And there's some policy in that, because who's on which committee is going to ultimately make it what bills sort of get out and what tone do those bills come out. Otherwise, it's really a soft power. So I travel the state and speak a lot. Because I was always an organizer as a legislator, I also have a pretty big email list.
Right.
So I put out newsletters to people across the state around the issues that are in the papers with a little more depth, a little more background, and a little bit more opportunity of how do you reach your legislator to ask them go farther or support this or oppose that. And I generate calls. You know, the very first time I was in the office back in 2017, I got elected in 2016, I put out a newsletter. And I said, here's how you reach your senators and reps. Please reach out to them, tell them how you feel. And in the first couple of days, I had 3 different senators come in and say,
why did you do that?
I hear you're telling people to reach out to me. And it wasn't in a fun tone.
Right.
Like, what are you doing? And I felt like I was doing my job.
Actually, you did, because that's what they're there for. So let me tell you, when do you run for governor?
Well, I did run in 2020 for 10 weeks before COVID hit. And then that was a train wreck.
Right.
Our governor did a reasonably good job, and he also distanced himself from Trump. I have a Republican governor. And so he walked back into office. I got crushed. I came back this 2 years ago. He is still in office. He's still, you know, as a Republican, if you say you don't like Trump, you're suddenly idolized by many Democrats.
Exactly.
And he's a very decent human being. I'm not going to throw shade on him. We just disagree on a ton of issues, and he vetoes quite a few bills. There's every possibility that in 2 years that's out there. We'll see what happens. For now, you know, running for re-election, as I said earlier, I've drawn a primary, and the reason I draw a primary is there are those in the Democratic Party who do not want to see me succeed.
Right.
Who do not want me to push the envelope and say wealthy people can pay more. For instance, we have a housing crisis in Vermont, as in many places. Vermont had the highest home price increase in the country last year.
Wow.
12% across the board. We have the second highest second home ownership. 16% of our residential properties are second homes. For me, we can do 2 things there. One is the top incomes, over $500,000. There was a proposal in the House to raise their tax by 3% on money over $500,000.
Over 500, yeah.
So if you made $1 million, you'd pay $15,000 more in taxes.
Right.
I think they could handle it. And it would have raised $70 million to subsidize affordable housing in Vermont. The Senate killed it. I'd like to see that talked about again. Second homeowners. For me, I believe those of us with second homes can afford to pay more so those can afford a first home.
Right.
Whether it's rent or own.
Right.
We don't have enough housing for everyday folks. And so, you know, those are the things I'm going to focus on now and keep amplifying. And the climate, Vermont literally just had massive rains from the leftover of that Hurricane Beryl.
That it creamed us. We still are without power in Houston.
So it hit you, and it came up, and literally a year to the day of our massive floods from last year. We have massive flooding. There are roads that are completely wiped out. 2 people died. Downtown Barrie got flooded again. Thankfully, our capital didn't quite flood this time, but if we don't address the climate, I mean, to me, the most important issues are economic justice issues, the climate, and electoral reform. Because without electoral reform, all the other social justice issues,
Everything
all the other
fails.
topics
Yeah.
fail. And so I'm just going to keep beating those drums.
Give me a closer.
Well, I am in an election. The primary is on the 13th of August. So if anybody does want to go to my website, Zuckerman, FORVT.com, I could use their help. But really the most important thing, just like here at Netroots Nation, is collect with your community members, do things at the local level, improve your community neighbor to neighbor, and collectively push your local legislators to go farther. Get involved. The biggest thing they want you to do is to pull back. And when they say pull back, you go forward and keep working with your allies and build the movement.
David Zuckerman, Lieutenant Governor of Vermont. It was my pleasure to speak to you. I really like where you're going, my friend.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate it.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.